I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.
Hey, welcome to HoopSpeak Live. I'm your host, Beckley Mason. We got only one co-host today, Ethan Sherwood-Strauss. Zach Harper will not be with us. Today's episode is a great one. We're going to have the boys from Disciples of Clyde, Kenneth Paul Drews, and Dan Filowitz with us. And as always, our show is brought to you by Robin Lopez Amusement Park Tours. You'll have the best time of your life. And there he is, really getting freaked out on Splash Mountain. All right, so awesome basketball last night. Just phenomenal games with the Thunder Grizz and then Clippers Lakers. Both games sort of didn't go down to the wire, but really entertaining basketball back and forth. A lot of people are talking about. I'm gonna let you speak in a second here, Ethan. A lot of people are talking about Memphis and the Clippers. The two teams that won and looked great, but I think both of us were sort of struck by the Heat.
Yes. The Heat have not looked good, and it's a defensive issue for them. They added Ray Allen, who was supposed to supercharge them offensively, and in many ways, that combination of him in the corner and LeBron driving is devastating. But when you combine Ray Allen's perimeter defense with Dwayne Wade looking not like Dwayne Wade, it gets ugly. And Dwayne Wade, he's really the personification of that thin line between genius and destructive madness. When he is not right, he's a little bit off or a little gimpy. So many of the super creative shots that aren't high efficiency shots for anybody else, but are for him, they start to look crazy and just wholly destructive to the offense and completely out of context. And so it's awkward when Dwayne Wade's bad. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel like Wade and there are a couple players who slip into this, and we'll jump back to the Heat. But there's this, so like when your grandpa gets old and like starts getting a little bit crazy, and you start having these conversations without him with the family, like, okay, are we gonna have to make some decisions here about what we do, And for the most part, he's fine. Like he's still great to be around. He's got all this wisdom. But there's some moments that make you wince and think, okay, like we need to start doing some long-range planning. And like Wade, Ginobili, there's some guys in the league right now who have been so good for so long. But I think that franchises and teams, rosters would be mistaken if they look at this and say, okay, well, they're a little banged up right now, but everything's going to be fine when they're healthy. The Heat roster, has changed some with bringing in worse players, but I also worse defenders. But I also think, they're not seeing any Joel Anthony, who is one of their best defenders, and Wade is hurt, and also Battier looks back like he did during the whole last season when he was terrible for most of the year, and then turned it on the playoffs. He's back to looking bad.
Yeah, and Battier is not good at guarding burly power forwards. It does seem to be his forte, at least when he's been on Carmelo Anthony, and last night on Blake Griffin, he looked like a bug on a windshield at points. With Wade and the Heat in general, it's hard to know whether or not they're playing possum. This is the frustration of watching 82 games and trying to come up with all these conclusions, doing power rankings and all that business, is that then the playoffs come along and suddenly they're not doing some of the bad things we're doing. Last year, the Heat gave up a ton of threes. Maybe not like this year, but it wasn't good. And everybody, all the experts said, oh man, this is really a deficiency for them. And then the playoffs came around and they gave up 30% in three-pointers because they were actually clamping down and doing things like having a laser pointer on Steve Novak and not even letting him get off the bench And so it's just hard to know whether or not this is real or this is just regular season tomfoolery.
Yeah, I do think it's real, and I think this is a real concern because they've always had. Oh, great. So Zach Lowe is digging into this in Grantland, so go over and read him. But we're going to continue talking about it.
What's the topic?
The point here is that he's, the Heat have always been able to fall back on their defensive ability, even when they didn't have like their elite defense last year, even when they weren't playing as well. They're always in the top 10. Now they're in like the bottom 5 in a lot of significant categories. And I think, things do change in the playoffs because they can sort of weaponize LeBron James a little more when they know their specific matchups night in and night out. And he's so good at short-circuiting the opposing offense. There's a lot of space on the court right now. They're trapping hard, and they're not quick enough to get back to the corners. And, their big guys aren't that big. So if Wade can't come over and block shots at the rim and protect the rim, that really hurts them because Battier really can't do much down there. And obviously, LeBron and Bosh do what they can, but they've got so much responsibility without Wade's help.
We should make a list of teams we trust least when they're bad. I just get the feeling, I've heard rumors, perhaps Spoelstra tries things. He looks to be something of a mad scientist right now when he's throwing out those lineups with Haslam at center, where I'm looking at him thinking, you're just doing this. You're doing this to just do it, to try to figure out if this can be done. This is not something you will be doing in the future. And to a certain extent, the Boston Celtics, when the Boston Celtics are bad in the regular season, I don't know we can necessarily look at that and say, oh man, they're going to be bad later on in the playoffs. So those are two teams where I don't trust their badness, and I'm just befuddled by it. And I also think that we might be too quickly overcorrecting and anointing the Grizzlies, who I will concede do have a shot at this thing, but based on 7 or 8 games, it might be a little hasty to come in and say the Grizzlies have fixed everything and this is the cream of the Western crop.
Yeah, what I think is, I think the Grizzlies have done some good things, and I think the main thing they've done is that their bench is the real deal. Evil Bayless is really embracing that like tenacious defense role, and he's making some good passes out of pick and rolls. Quincy Pondexter looks like he's been training with the Spurs, the way he's filling gaps and making corner threes. And they always leave Gasol out there with that group, and that really helps them too. And Spates is an athletic. I mean, they just have like a lot of good players, and they play really hard. And in the regular season, I think we've seen they're sort of like a bizarro Spurs where they're super deep, but in a way where they're super deep and aggressive and mean the whole time, where the Spurs are just sort of this, it seems like a fluid machine that just rolls on regardless of who they're playing against.
Yeah. It's grit versus fluidity for the Spurs versus the Grizzlies. I just sense that we might have what happened last year with the Grizzlies happen this year, where everybody, it's a team that people love, so everybody will fall in love with them and then project what they want from the Grizzlies onto what will actually happen, and then perhaps they will disappoint us next year. But that might be getting ahead of ourselves. If you would be so kind, I would like to segue to one Andrei Kirilenko out of nowhere, not too smoothly, because I was watching him last night. And I know the bigger story is that the Bobcats might not completely suck, but I'm more amazed by how perhaps AK's career has been squandered up until this point. Because I'm a negative person, I can't view it as, oh my god, he's playing so well. I have to view it as, oh my god, Jerry Sloan wasted all of his talent.
Yeah, I think the more that Sloan did some good things, and obviously he's very, very successful, but he wasn't like a people person, and I think that Kirilenko is really enjoying being on this team. He's talked about how much fun he had playing in Russia and on the Russian national team, and you could really see like there was no life in his eyes like the last few years in Utah, and now there's still no life in his eyes because he's
just on that one night a year, just on that one night of the year that his wife granted him. But yeah, other than that.
Yeah, we can talk. We need to talk about this. That is an incredible thing. So he's got that get out of jail pass. I have to say, when you brought up Kirilenko and you said Andrei, I thought we were going to talk about Drummond. I was all queued up for that. You've got two Andres that you love talking about. Maybe we can get to Drummond after.
Yeah, that's a whole other show.
Anything more you want to say
about Kirilenko? I just love the way he plays basketball. He plays in a unique way, and it's very subtle. He doesn't dominate the game. He just sort of nudges the game where it needs to be, like a Ouija board. He's very subtle with how he handles possessions, and he plays within the team concept. And when you look at his stat lines, nobody else has a stat line quite like that, with points in the kind of low double digits and rebounds of a power forward and assists of an off guard. It's really cool. Oh, and the 2 block shots are also awesome. Maybe I'm playing a little fantasy basketball, and that might be tainting in a positive way my view of Andrei Kirilenko.
Yeah, I wrote about Kirilenko. I put him in my list of NBA pests, and I think I said that he was a walking deflection. And that really sums up his game. He's got his fingertips on everything in the game, and he's got, as you say, this sort of subtle presence throughout the whole thing, except for the one night of the year, which is interesting. I wonder if he goes back to Russia for that, if he stays domestic. Something to discuss with our next guest. I'm sure they'll have some good thoughts on it. From the Disciples of Clyde's podcast, it is Kenneth Paul Drews and Dan Filowitz. Boys, how you guys doing? Oh yeah, on one screen. This is a HoopSpeak Live first on Spreecast. So how are you guys doing?
We're good.
We're good. We're very rarely on one screen together.
Yes.
Because
Sure.
we don't want people to talk.
And we're not the same person. Some people think it's just one guy doing 2 voices, but it's not. It's
Yeah, we've been a masterful editing job. That was one person with 2 voices.
All right, guys. Let's hop right into this with a goofy and contrived game. Word association. All right, we're just going to go through some of your nicks, and we're going to pull out some words, and I guess you guys can just trade back and forth. I'll say the words. I'll leave the answering order to you guys. Let's start with Dolan.
I'll start with that one. First one that came to mind was that I crapped my pants.
All right. Rashid Wallace.
Well, what was the word? I'm sorry.
It was Rashid Wallace.
Rashid Wallace. Fun to have around, but ultimately, I think he's playing too many minutes.
That's like 17,000 words.
Well, he's playing too many minutes if you hype him.
I like this paragraph association that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
You've heard our podcast. This is your fault if we talk too much.
We'll clearly more before our 12 minutes is up. Mike D'Antoni.
We lost you.
D'Antoni. The word is sad.
All right. How about Daniel Tony D'Antoni, Mike's brother?
Nepotism.
Ooh. Schumpert.
Nepotism.
Freeloading Schumpert.
Yeah. His father is actually in the Straight Shot.
There you go.
So.
Bass player. Yeah, always laughs at JD's jokes. That's what I heard.
What are you transitioning from this game? I want to know in general. I want to gauge your Knicks expectations. This is a topic. Ken Devine's been writing about it as to how realistic a famously perhaps unrealistic fan base is with this newfound rush of positivity. Are you guys thinking championship right now? Is that really something deep within yourselves that you feel?
Championship's probably strong, but it's nice to have a competent team. I think you've been a Knicks fan long enough you have been like that in the last 10 years. At any point, you have to temper expectations always, because we've been lulled into short bursts of success before. This feels like the most legitimate burst of success that we've seen in a long time, because it's coming from like solid defensive play from a legitimately good defender in Tyson Chandler, and smart ball movement and a slower pace from guys who can actually play point guard. And Carmelo Anthony playing, this is probably the best use you can think of for someone like Carmelo, who's a really great scorer and not particularly great in other areas, but could be if he gave it a shot. And so, I mean, look, this is a little bit much because we're like, they're 5-0, and they'll lose one or two of these games coming up against the Spurs or never again. No, all right. So
I was doing some proportions the other day on Twitter. You can use calculators and long division evidently, and if they stay at this pace, they're going to win 82 games. That would be a record.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you go.
That's good math.
You're welcome.
I've seen no reason to think they'd fall off this pace. They look great. So, I mean, that's a good way to get a 1 seed. It'd be very disappointing if you then lose in the playoffs after that 82-0 stretch.
Swept in the first round would be a crushing blow after 82-0, I think.
I think so.
I'd be a little surprised if that happened.
I mean, look, talk to Patriots fans.
Yeah, right. The next day I'd be walking around going, what happened?
That's a good question. Would you prefer that outcome to perhaps even making the conference finals, just to have that historical footnote of going 82-0 only to get swept in the first round?
I think it'd be worth it just for the frameable back page of the Daily News. What amazing headline they come up with.
WFAN the next day would be great. Like all that night, I think all these guys from Pelham just kvetching about the Knicks. That'd be good.
I think what's funny about the Knicks is that right now they make sense. They make sense logically in a way that the Mavericks did in 2011, and I like them a lot. But there's always this narrative whenever the Knicks are doing well of who's going to come in and screw it up, because fundamentally in the aggregate the team doesn't make sense. So I'm wondering, are you concerned about how Shumpert's going to fit in? Because everybody's talking about Amare, and to me, I feel like Shumpert makes less sense as a Knicks-involved guy because of his lack of shooting than perhaps Amare.
He doesn't. I think, fortunately, and I say this in quote-unquote, he is hurt, and I don't think this is for someone who did what he did last year, this is not the kind of sophomore year that he would reasonably expect. He kind of earned a lot of minutes last year. He's going to come back and not get them, and I think that's probably good this year, because I think if he can get healthy and give you 12 minutes and then get ready for next year, that's better than taking minutes from Smith. And Kidd or Perchioni, got that, are going to have to get some backup point guard minutes. So he will, unless Woodson gives him some modest amount of minutes, and it's probably good in the long run anyway because he's not needed. In his case, I think 12 minutes will be good for both him and the team. It won't screw up what seems to be a pretty fragile chemistry.
I think he takes Brewer's minutes. I think that's where it comes from, and he has. Not exactly the same, but it's the similar kind of skill set that Brewer has, because Brewer's not a great shooter, but he plays good defense and makes good cuts, and you saw some of that from Shumpert last year. So if he's doing that, that would work. I mean, ultimately, you have these old guys playing key minutes. They're not going to be able to play key minutes for 82 games. So if there's times where instead of them throwing out Kidd and Prigioni as for big minutes, and instead of have Shumpert running the point with the second team for a little bit or something like that, just to fill in the gaps, that's I think the difference between mediocre and top 4 seed. If that works,
I hope Woodson has the strength to go with what's working and not what kind of makes sense. There's certain expectation you had. When Shumpert gets back, we got to fill the gaps until that happens. And if it's not working that way, then what I like about Woodson is he seems to have the fortitude to make decisions like that. And obviously, I'm sure your next question will be about Amare. I got a feeling he has the fortitude and the status at this point, especially if they keep winning, to kind of do what needs to be done and not what makes sense in the agent or the player's mind or even Mr. Dolan's mind.
Yeah, I think if they keep winning, I mean, if they're 20-3 when Amari comes back, like Woodson's going to be able to do whatever the hell he wants, and like everyone's just going to have to go with it because they're going to be rolling like that. I've been thinking about this Mavs parallel a lot too because of Chandler and Kidd and the way that Anthony like fills in kind of a similar way as Dirk as a high post threat, and they've got this passing and Terry and JR, like there's all these parallels, but Ray Felton is the one thing that's like unaccountable. As much as we're thinking about these other guys coming back, to me another question is like, when does Ray Felton come back, and are we nervous that like that's where the breakdown is going to be with this team?
Well, that's a great point, because that is sort of the biggest difference between this year and other years is they actually have a guy who plays point guard and can make entry passes and drive to the lane, which, I mean, they didn't have that last year at all. Tony Douglas and, half of Mike Bibby whatever Baron Davis, tried to do. I mean, those guys weren't able to make entry passes.
Jeremy Lin didn't exist right now? Is that what that just was?
How often was he on the floor with the real lineup?
Yeah, look, Lin played for like what?
Mike Bibby and not Jeremy Lin as Knicks point guards of last year.
No, Jeremy Lin. That's when they did have one. That's why it worked.
Mm-hmm.
But it was awesome. But it was short lived. And they don't have that. So, but like, Lin could have done a similar kind of thing as Felton, I think. I mean, their games are different, but the point of them is that they need someone to give other guys the ball in the place where they're supposed to get it,
and then hit a shot. Make something happen. What's the statistical outlier for Ray Felton right now? You guys are much more plugged into stats than we are. I don't see. I mean, J.R. Smith is shooting in the 70s from 3-point range. What is Ray Felton doing that he can't repeat if he's in good shape? He's always been a tough, hard-nosed guy. Yeah,
I think the thing with Felton is that teams are chasing him over screens right now and letting him drive rather than making him pull up and hit that 18-footer. And I remember, and you guys actually, I wanted to check with you. I remember Felton and Stoudemire having this great chemistry, and then at the end of games, teams just saying, "Okay, Felton, like you're gonna have to make this 17-footer to beat us." And it felt like that didn't work very much. I wasn't writing or reading as much then, so I don't know like what the stats were, but I just feel like when the chips are down, Felton, I don't trust that.
Well, he's not. Obviously, he's not. Any of the other better point guards, but he's good. And I think that when you're surrounded by other good players to very good, and if J.R. Smith is going to be playing like an all-star, and Amari comes back and gives you anything and fits in, I think it is good enough. I mean, where are all the title winners since Isaiah Thomas, where the best point guard in the league won the title? It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened since Isaiah. Unless you want to call Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen a point guard, then those guys, those superhumans, don't win as much. The rest of the team is the key.
And with Carmelo as another option, I mean, Carmelo Anthony can create a shot for himself at the end of the game from wherever on the floor. He can hit a three. He can hit a mid range. He can go down low. I mean, Amari is pretty much limited to mid range and in, and you don't really want him taking a mid range jump shot to win the game. So, I think that's a difference from what that was. Look, how Amari is going to fit in is going to be fascinating to watch. I hope he comes back in a time in the season where they have some cushion to play with it. Where it's not like it'd be nice if they were something along the lines of 15-8 or 20-10 or something like that, and they can so if they lost 3 or 4 games but they were in it because they were getting used to it. I mean, that's okay in the grand scheme of an 82-game season. And look, this team is built to try to make a run. You asked about the championship. I doubt it, but
he's better than who is Kirk Henderson? He's better than Caron Butler. That's ridiculous. Come on, I don't know. I'm sure Kirk. lots of good opinions on stuff. He's better than Caron Butler was in his role there.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the high holy days aren't during the playoffs, because then both sides could have sort of a smooth, an excuse, perhaps, separate Amare from some of the action there. Something that would be save face for both sides. So I mean, I don't know if it's. Yep.
I think Amari is going to be hosting a Passover Seder during the playoffs this year.
Good stuff.
A long Passover Seder. I would argue that he might be a little bit like Caron Butler, because defense is a thing.
Wait, defense is a thing now?
It's a thing now, I know, like, back in the day, we were just all offense, but now that we have the synergy and we have the plus-minus, we're noticing that defense is a thing, and defense being a thing, when you look at Amare, can be concerning.
Well, to say the least.
Yeah, I do think that they are. If hopefully the system can work there, I would say also that they do need a little more offense out of the front court. It's not just putting an entire square peg round hole type of situation. So any good team would try to integrate a guy who can score at a high clip and get him his shots, and he does have pretty deep range. So regardless of how good he is as a defender, and hopefully he buys in a little more and in fewer minutes, maybe that could be helpful. But they do need some more points. I mean, J.R. Smith isn't going to shoot like this forever, and so they're going to need points from elsewhere.
Yeah, and you could see them, building that second unit around J.R. Smith and Amare, pick and roll with Novak on the wing, or have Prignoni on the ball, and then put Smith as a shooter out of it. Yoni. And yeah, I hope that he's willing to go for it, because Amare. So I run into Amare, not like he knows that I'm running into him, but every once in a while in New York, like he lives by a friend of mine, and so I see him walking around with his kids and stuff, and he just seems like such a nice man. I just really hope that it works out for him.
Yeah.
Analysis.
Well, this is like Sesame Street. I think it's like we want everything to be rainbows and lessons learned at the end.
Until he's not on. Yeah, I agree. I think his story is a compelling one. He keeps fighting back from everything. You go back to his personal life when he was a teenager. He just keeps coming, and there's no reason to believe he can't have another renaissance, because he's proven he's had a lot of different phases of his life and his career, and he's still got a lot of skills. He's still very athletic relative to the other power forwards and centers out there. So he has a lot to offer. He's obvious. This team will not be good if he's a 26 point a game guy playing 35 minutes, but in something less, 28 minutes and 18 points, 17 points, I think not only is that good for him, that's something that they need. So I would hope it works out.
I mean, on defense, he does try. He has the worst defensive instinct I've ever seen, but it's not from lack of effort. It's from just lack of ability and instinct.
Right, he can't move laterally because his knees don't let him. So on offense, when he's moving straight to the rim, he can still dunk. But if he has to hop 8 feet to his left, that's a problem. Well, I think that we have sufficiently talked ourselves into Amare and the Knicks. So mission accomplished for this visit, guys.
Also, I like the Republicans to win Ohio.
It's not over yet, damn it!
They can take this.
Yep. I didn't hear any bell.
No, I was saying. It's Obamacare that Dan and I have to share a screen.
That's true.
That's bullshit. Pardon me.
No, I mean, this is the world we're living in. I'm gonna secede to Texas and just hang out with James Harden. That's my plan.
There you go.
This is a communist screen.
All right. Well, Live stays promoting socialism. Thanks a lot to Disciples of Clyde, Ken, and Dan. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being on.
All right, legends of NBA podcast-ery, the Disciples of Clyde. All right, meaty topic to get to before we have to go. From our friend Kirk, who got called out. is it an acceptable position to support Royce White in general, but to also think he's gone about his latest kerfuffle, I doubt he would call it that, in the worst possible way? Okay, for those of you who don't know...
He'd call it imbroglio.
It's imbroglio, exactly.
Yeah.
Royce White is sort of on the rocks with the Rockets right now. He got sent to the D-League. He hasn't been reporting. He said that basically the Rockets haven't come through with what they agreed on. The Rockets have said Royce isn't showing up to the therapy sessions we provided and such. Clearly some miscommunication there. Some he said, she said. Royce took to Twitter and sort of blasted the Rockets and anyone who criticizes him about taking care of himself and his health and everything. It didn't look good. Ethan, what are your thoughts on this?
I just don't rush to judgment on who he is and what this means. He hasn't, in my opinion, handled this particularly well. But rather than, there's a lot of moralizing and there's a lot of shaking your fist at somebody for not handling something well in the sports world or for being a hypocrite or, yeah, it's not a charity. You have to get that. He's 21 years old. I couldn't hold down a job at 21 years old. I'm barely employable today. So when I see Royce White doing something like tweeting out from the plane some not nice things to say about the Rockets organization, I just hope that he eventually gets on track and finds the help he needs and also comes to understand that it's a fairly cruel world out there and the NBA is a fairly cruel business and that you can't have much in the way of expectations as far as them helping you out.
Right. I think that he's right to be aggressive with what he's done, but I also think that he is, he's the first one doing this, right? Like, there's no roadmap for what you're supposed to do when you're open with your anxiety issues. There's, some trails with weeds over them of people who have gone down bad paths and never come back to the NBA. But there's no guided sign saying, okay, here's how you talk to your team, then here's how you do this next step. And so, in some ways he's taking the bruises that all pioneers do when they don't know what they're doing, basically, and they're walking into the brambles and hoping that something good is going to happen for them. And I think that in some ways the Rockets are a great organization and they're very progressive and they are thoughtful and professional. And in some ways, he's going to an organization that doesn't need to play him, that is sort of in flux in where they're coming and going. So it's not like the perfect situation. You could imagine him going to a team that wants to play him 30 minutes a night, and this is a little easier for him to handle.
Yeah, it's tough because ultimately their decisions with him, the decisions they have to make for every player as far as how much playing time, does influence the psyche. It does influence how somebody feels. So, I would agree with Kirk Henderson. I would also say, again, that he's 21 years old. Poor judgment is easy to come by among people of that age. And so while I would agree there, I would also not necessarily jump to the conclusion that this means he's this and he's this forever. It's a difficult circumstance. I think we can all agree that to play in the NBA, you need to fly. So if he can't fly, if it's just not possible, that's not going to really work out for him. And there's nothing that can be done about that. It's this thing that we take for granted about the league that we don't think about with all these players is that there's a ton of travel involved and a ton of flying involved. And if you can't do that, it's not really going to happen. So I hope it works out for him. I do. And I am rooting for him.
Are there any really? I don't know how they travel in Europe, but I wonder if you play in a continent that's really well connected by trains. If he can go play in Spain, and it's just not as big of a deal because every game is 100 miles away.
They have a better public transportation infrastructure, so those trains go really fast. But then you have the problem of, well, is that going to stoke the anxiety and those fears because the trains are almost like planes when we get to Europe because of the advanced infrastructure, and I don't even know what. That's just something you're going to have to tell me.
Well, I'm not going to tell you. How about that?
Next show.
Let's wrap this up with Dagger Smash noted. My dagger has to do with the Nets Celtics game I'll be going to tonight. The Nets pick and roll defense, the big men are terrible, and Rajon Rondo is a master at killing guys who basically don't play pick and roll defense. So I'm saying the over-under on his assists tonight at 15. I think he is going to have a monster game, and I'm much looking forward to seeing it in person.
Yeah, my smash is going to be an angry smash and something I've whined out a few times on Twitter, but Kevin Martin, he's a good basketball player. He's a good basketball player. He's effective, and he's a pragmatist. He does what he needs to do to get points, and so far in Oklahoma City he's been working out. But he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be a good basketball player, or he shouldn't at least be this good. His strategy is just predicated on running into people and then jumping backwards and doing this. And it's obvious. Like, I'm not even mad at Kevin Martin. I'm mad at the whole NBA reffing establishment. I used to only have to deal with this, 3 times a year when the Warriors would play the Rockets, and it would annoy the hell out of me. But for all the, oh my god, the game, it happened so fast, you can see it in real time. It is obvious in real time. It is embarrassing that these refs, these old, decrepit, senior citizen NBA refs can't see this. It's a trolling of basketball, a cynical way to play, and I'm just sick of being allowed and encouraged. So that's my smash.
Strong smash. Zach's rantery would be proud. All right, Peepin' James, come on and drop a note for us.
My note is actually breaking news. The Wizards just put out a press release saying that they signed Sean Livingston, and this makes me extremely happy. I've been saying they should do this since John Wall got hurt, and I'm very sad that AJ Price went down, but finally they have a guy that can play point guard properly for them. I think they needed to do this a while ago, and I'm glad he found a home.
Yeah, I like Sean Livingston. He played with the Wizards a while ago, and when I was living in Washington, I got to see him play. Like, he just like knows how to play point guard. He knows how to get guys the ball in the right spot. He's got a little post-up game. It is weird that he wasn't on teams when guys like AJ Price, who I think is a terrible player, were on a team. That injury history is scary, but happy for him as well. All right, then. Everybody who came on to watch, thanks to the Disciple of Clyde dudes, Ethan, Peepin' James, Anthony Bain for the images, as always. We will be back on Tuesday. Until then, let's get that theme song going.
James.
I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.